Our gospel lesson for this Wednesday of Holy Week is from the Gospel of John, chapter 13, verses 21 through 32. After saying this, Jesus was troubled in spirit and declared, "Very truly I tell you, one of you shall betray me." The disciples looked at one another, uncertain of whom he was speaking. One of his disciples, the one whom Jesus loved, was reclining next to him. Simon Peter therefore motioned to him to ask Jesus of whom he was speaking. So while reclining next to Jesus, he asked him, "Lord, who is it?" Jesus answered, "It is the one to whom I give this piece of bread when I have dipped it in the dish." So when he had dipped the piece of bread, he gave it to Judas, son of Simon Iscariot. After he received the piece of bread, Satan entered into him. Jesus said to him, "Do quickly what you are going to do." Now no one at the table knew why he said this. Some thought that because Judas had the common purse, Jesus was telling him, "Buy what we need for the festival," or that he should give something to the poor. So after receiving the piece of bread, he immediately went out, and it was night. When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once." It was a night like many other nights, only more so. Jesus had gathered a group of friends around himself. It would be presumptuous of us to limit the gathering to a chosen 12, especially here in John's Gospel, where Mary and Martha and others play such prominent roles. Peter is there, Philip too, and of course Judas is there, and another we know only as the Beloved, a fellowship of friends, or perhaps a teacher and his students. The teacher has offered to wash the pupils' feet. Impetuous Simon declined at first, but then, of course, asked for a bath. But that's tomorrow's story. And the teacher is troubled. Was he angered at Peter's refusal to submit, or by his backtracking for his head and hands as well as his feet? Was he disappointed with his students, for surely they should have offered to perform the much-needed task? Was he troubled by the future, the night drawing nigh? His words should have been more shocking than the task, now complete. "I tell you the truth, one of you is going to betray me." Lounging on cushions, the friend's reaction is more subdued. Mark recalls a litany of "surely not I." Is it I? Surely not. But here in the Gospel of John, only Peter reacts with just a nod towards his friend, as if to say, ask him what he means, who it is, what betrayal. And the one whom Jesus loved leans his head back and rests on Jesus' bosom. An act of love. Friendship too intimate for a question such as this. "Who is it, Lord? Who is it that will betray you?" And Jesus replies, "The one to whom I give this piece of bread." There were other times, too many to recall, times when Jesus had broken bread and given it to his friends. Once, with just 5 loaves of barley and 2 fish, multitudes of famished friends were filled, and to spare. "I am the bread of life," he had said. "Whoever comes to me will never be hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty." And Jesus replies, the one to whom I give this piece of bread. If this is the occasion referred to by the other gospel writers, when Jesus broke bread, after giving thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Take, eat." Then Judas was not alone in receiving bread out from Jesus' hand. Didn't each one present at that table so long ago take bread in hand? Didn't each one eat it at his command? And what of tomorrow? We too may join him there once more in the upper room. And Jesus replies, "This one to whom I give this piece of bread." I can hear the lunchtime talking. The homily is being devoured. He assumed too much, read too much into it. That preacher's got it wrong. And you may be right. But I won't be the last to get it wrong, and I certainly am not the first. You're free to question or simply to reject and move on to the day's demands, for the day's demands are great these days. The gathered few so many ages past did much the same. "Where is Judas going?" they spoke under their breath between each bite of bread. "He's going shopping. The Pascha's nigh," was what somebody said. Another, hearkening back to an earlier conversation, believed the poor were to be fed. So Judas left, and there they lay, each focused who knows where. Peter will soon deny him. The others will all run away. Only the beloved and the women will stay. And Jesus replies, "The one to whom I give this piece of bread." One of the great hymns of faith comes from the pen of the 17th century hymnist Johann Heermann. Recent scholarship suggests that Heermann based his hymn, "Ah, Holy Jesus," on an 11th century Latin verse by Jean de Faucamp. The most common English translation is the work of British poet laureate Robert Bridges. Heermann was a pastor and a writer who lived in several locations in Cilicia, where during the 30-year war he experienced exceptional tragedy, loss of home and property, and several narrow escapes from death. During this time, Germany was devastated and depopulated by the miseries of bloody warfare, including plague and famine. The poet wrote the hymn when most of his parishioners must have been saying, "What have I done to deserve all this suffering?" For centuries, this hymn was mostly unsung, its voice silenced. Perhaps it was too intimate. Perhaps it was the profound confession of responsibility found in stanza 2 that kept the hymn from popular usage. Who was the guilty? Who brought this upon thee? Alas, my treason, Jesus, hath undone thee. 'Twas I, Lord Jesus, I it was denied thee. I crucified thee. Fortunately, the hymnal explosion of the last 40 years resurrected this great hymn of faith. Almost every denominational hymnal and many non-denominational hymnals as well include Heermann's timely confession. Why the rediscovery? Perhaps the Church's reclaiming of its liturgical life called for its inclusion. Perhaps some musicologist or theologian with great influence sought its incorporation. Perhaps the aftermath of the Holocaust has demanded a more directed act of contrition. We live in a time of human achievement like never before. We know more, can do more, and be more. We can turn the night into day and produce a perfect clone. But it seems to me, the more we know, the more we come face to face with our limitations. We are, after all, in the midst of a pandemic, destined to kill more than the 30 Years' War. And we are no closer to knowing its cure than they were to knowing the cure of the Black Death. Even with our grand strides and achievements, we are still stumbling around in the night. And oftentimes our greatest success has had a cost that was much too high. Betrayal still holds sway, and denial has become a place to hide. So why the recovery of this age-old hymn? Perhaps we are finally beginning to realize that Jesus' words still ring true today. The one to whom I give this piece of bread. Perhaps only now are we ready to take the bread from Jesus' hand, ready to pray those words ourselves, ready to stand beneath the cross, ready to wait in the garden. Who is it, Lord? 'Twas I, Lord Jesus. I it was denied thee. I crucified thee. Amen.